This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And we are on, I am on location, It's supposed to be out here, it's supposed to be sunny in California. I don't know. I must have brought Jersey misery over on this side of things. I gotta tell you. But as always, man, my man Shaw always looking like he is the ultimate night show host. Sporting the fresh background and the backdrop. What's good, my brother?
Doing well, man. Doing well. Excited to be here with you on The Baseline yet again. We have a lot to discuss. A lot has happened since we last convened on our podcast. So we'll try to do a condensed, abridged, but very healthy and meaningful episode this week, as always.
Yeah, abridged and healthy. Right. Feels like we're about to get into one of those 45-minute, high interval sessions.
Yeah.
To go through all the craziness that's happened basically in the last week or so. But as always, man, we appreciate everybody for hopping on board with us this week. As always, be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. And you know where to locate us, man. Whenever we drop our episode, you can go to www.thebaselineNBA.com. And then you can also check us out if you catch us on the YouTube channel with the blue and white logo down in the right-hand corner. That means we rocks with the 19 Media Group family. So you can not only check us, but also check out the family of great content creators. You can go to www.19mediagroup.com. So, Shaw, let's get right into it, man. So much is happening in the NBA. It's kind of even, hard to keep your head still. It's constantly on a swivel when it comes to the storylines. And obviously the big storyline that I think really needs to, get a little teeth, dig ourselves into here is regarding, Gregg Popovich, arguably one of the greatest head coaches of all time. He is finally, decided to no longer fight that fight of trying to come back to coach. Obviously, people who have been paying attention to his circumstances, his health condition, suffered a major stroke and has been on the mend. And so basically, all eyes were hopeful that he may come back to coaching, but he's realized that, it's time for him to move on. He's now being transitioned to the president of basketball operations in a senior role. You can't get more senior than the dynasty that he built with the Spurs. But I just wanted to get your perspective on this, Shaw, because I think we kind of knew that this was coming.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people were probably saying maybe Pop has stayed in the game a little bit longer than necessary, but we knew that this was coming. And I just think that it's great that, while he is still healthy and still wants to be a part of the basketball space, that the San Antonio Spurs found a way for him to kind of exit this stage of his life gracefully and transition him more, into something that I think he's been clearly doing for quite some time.
Yeah, there's no doubt about Pop's legacy, his meaning to the game, his meaning to San Antonio specifically. When you talk about somebody who was never going to get fired, you're talking about Gregg Popovich. So we know, I think from the outside looking in, that the Wemby introduction into the Spurs organization probably gave Pop a little bit more exuberance and want to kind of have the runway extended a little bit on his coaching career, but health would not permit for that. So San Antonio doing right by a legacy and veteran and Hall of Fame individual and letting him go out on his shield in the way that he wants to, still going up to the front office to be a part of the organization, not necessarily retiring, but doing what needs to be done to focus on himself and his immediate family, because his family needs him. Basketball is cool and all, and we all love what we cover in the NBA, but nothing's more important than the family and nothing more important than your health and you being here in essence to enjoy that family. So he's at a stage now where that makes the most amount of sense for him. I think everybody in the organization is aligned. Wemby, De'Aaron Fox, Chris Paul, even to a lesser degree, they understand what needs to be done here. And he'll be around in San Antonio, won't be around on some of those away games. And, we won't get to see him on the sidelines the way that we're used to. But I'm happy for him that he gets to do this in a way that makes sense to protect his health and to be with his family first and foremost.
I want to say that I'm actually, this is an unsuspecting sacrifice that I think is being made here, not just by Gregg Popovich, but unknowingly, the timing of what he's doing here, I think really helps us kind of take pause on some of the drama that has surrounded, the coaching atmosphere or the coaching ethos that we've experienced over the last couple of months. I really feel like Gregg Popovich and Eric Spoelstra are the last quote unquote of that dying breed. You could probably throw Rick Carlisle in there because I think his second stint with the Indiana Pacers will serve him properly. That if there are any changes that are going to take place for coaches who have had a lot of teeth in the game, who've shown a level of success, the organizations are going to do right by making sure that whether or not they land on their feet or wherever it is that they transition to, it won't be something that's being done just unceremoniously or in a way that really does a disservice to both the organization and also does a disservice to the legacy of the head coach. And I appreciate the fact that even though the San Antonio Spurs circumstance is not exactly like that, because it's the San Antonio Spurs and because it's Gregg Popovich and because there is such a long tenure of that Spur culture that is not being tarnished in the way that they're handling this, I think helps put a pause a little bit on so much of the negativity that has been surrounding the coaching carousel that's been happening so far this season in the NBA.
Yeah, I think and I say this with a certain level of confidence, because we're both air quote middle age or whatever. So we'll see what happens after our time as well. But I don't know that there'll be another Pop, not in terms of another coach who will be able to pass his records in terms of wins, but somebody that'll be with the organization for the entirety of the career. The league has transitioned to a way where we want instant gratification and we don't give people 15, 20, 25-year runways to be with an organization. It just doesn't happen. So save Spoelstra. And we talked a little bit about how that situation is going in Miami, and I don't know what happened once the Riley regime kind of goes on, and retires as well. But I don't know that we'll see another Pop. Somebody just, that many years in consistency, whether they are winning, middle ground, losing, rebuilding, they stuck with him. And he was the culture of that organization in a very real and meaningful way. Now passing this on to Mitch Johnson, and we'll see where that goes for him. I think he had a good year as a first year head coach, but I just feel like truly we'll never see another one like Pop because the league just isn't formatted in a way to allow for that level of longevity in that specific position.
Yeah, so I just think that when it comes to the way we're going to start looking at Mitch Johnson, we will have to give him leeway, right? We have to give him that opportunity. I think he did an excellent job under the circumstances. And I think that level of confidence that, Popovich should have in making sure that he is basically handing the reins over to him. I think you also have to look at, well, too, the fan base. The fan base, I think, really understands you have a generational talent. I think they want to be supportive of Mitch Johnson's belief in the future of what the Spurs is going to look like with Wembanyama. And I think the savviness of Gregg Popovich, and what he brings, that aura that he brings, I think lends him well that he's got a little bit of a clearing space for them to go out there and succeed. Listen, Johnson made his bones, right? And I think if Wembanyama is on board, any of the other prospects that the Spurs are going to be looking at in order to kind of, bring them along the fold to help round out that roster, they're all on board. I think he's going to be in good hands. And again, the Spurs, despite something like this, will still be in contention, right? Like they're going to be the conversation of the offseason. They're going to be the conversation of what level of improvement they're going to make into the offseason. And we're going to have to pay, a lot of attention. One thing I'll say this before we, move on to, the rest of our show. I just love the fact that Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili came out there with Popovich, and in Popovich style, he's like, listen, I'm no longer the head coach. And then, he just kind of unveils the jacket and says, I'm the Jefe now. You can call me the Jefe, right? Like that, I only dream of having certain head coaches have that kind of flair, who's being able to flip that persona, that stigma that he's carried, that he's just, non-conversational, he's non-approachable. everything about him shows you the evolution of a man. And the game of basketball, while it still stays that way, he himself has never been has been above reproach.
Yeah.
And I think it's just great to see that he has put himself again in that space where, he's gracefully aging, but he's also gracefully showing us what the game of basketball has done for him and what he's doing for it in return.
Yeah, the dry humor, the deadpan. I know there's been a lot of people, including myself, have been afraid. And while I don't have like these great and gargantuan Popovich stories because I'm not that seasoned of a reporter, but I have been in rooms, in a press conference where he is, and yeah, I was afraid to ask a question. But at the end of the day, he's still incredibly human, and that's the thing that he didn't always show to everybody all the time, but that was really, really relevant and apparent, I think, when it mattered most. And he spoke out on a lot of cultural and various issues, when it came to how our country was being run at various times as well, too, to kind of show the type of individual and humanitarian that he really is. But like I said, 29 seasons, five championships, 1,422 wins. There's no other like Pop. So we salute you on an amazing career. San Antonio Spurs, an amazing organization. And what he does now is going into that front office role. I'm sure that will still be at the level of excellence that only the Greg Popovich can deliver.
Yeah, just gonna miss some of that dry humor at times. He just won't be in front of the camera nearly as much. But it was always Instagram.
Yeah, I can
You're
see
tuned to
Greg
the
on
base.
IG, right?
You're tuned to the baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we're going to give our perspective, what's been going on. First round impressions. Teams that have obviously been taken off the board, off the chessboard. What our expectations are for the next round. Is just so much going on with the NBA, so you gotta love it. And listen, if you're somebody that's been down with Prize Picks, you'll even love it more, man, because the basketball playoffs are here and the action is heating up on Prize Picks, the best place for you to cash in on your favorite sports. Don't miss on your last chance to add your favorite players from court to your Prize Picks lineup. Whether it's points, rebounds, assists, take your pick of more or less for your shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Download the app and use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Remember, Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions. Turn your playoff hot takes into tickets to basketball championship series. Every lineup you make will qualify you for the Takes 2 Tickets sweepstakes, which you can get and a guest at a VIP trip to the chip. Every Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts several projections on the board, usually between 15 and 25%. They also offer Flex Fridays. Make sure you opt in and tap the checkbox in your lineup builder to be eligible for the protected play. Choose squares from any game on the board. If your lineup doesn't win, you get your net losses back and promo funds up to your promo limit as soon as the lineup settles. You can also mix your selections across sports in your Prize Picks lineup. I might take Juan Soto for 2 RBIs and Jason Tatum for more than 26 points to combine my love for basketball and baseball. Prize Picks is simply the best way to win cash while watching sports. Join millions of users and sign up today with the promo code CLNS to get $50 after you play your first $5 lineup. The baseline is rocking with Prize Picks, and you should too. Prize Picks, run your game. Coming up, Sean and I get into the first round impressions. Don't want to miss it here on the baseline. We are back, Callie Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA Podcast. Time for us to get into our first round impressions of the NBA playoffs, Shaw. Look, it wasn't too surprising, I think, when we made our predictions as it pertains to who is going to be coming out of the first round of the playoffs. Maybe a little bit of shakeup, or maybe, may have missed a target here or there on wins, losses. But I think the bigger storyline that has to be discussed is how the teams were exited. And I think two teams really kind of stick out and resonate with me more than anything. When I think about how the Los Angeles Clippers and how the Milwaukee Bucks were eliminated in the playoffs, to me, believe that those are two teams people need to pay attention to when it comes to what the offseason expectations might be, what the murmurs and rumblings are going to sound like. And it's not so much that I'm thinking that there's going to be drastic changes, but I think the way that these two teams performed in the playoffs, how the circumstances played themselves out, I think now has ramped up a lot more fervor about something needing to be done for both of those organizations.
Yeah, so I mean, we said even off air, we won't get too autopsy-ish, but at the same time, it needs to be discussed. So you're picking them out. I'm actually going to not necessarily dodge your question, but I'm going to throw a team that I didn't expect to be out as quickly and in the fashion in that is, and then that's the Lakers. I think I'm disappointed, when that. So the Clippers, hey, they drew us in once again. Like, you know what I mean? Like darkness, my old friend. Like here we go again. And while they had every opportunity to win that series, they blew literally 2 games in that series and could have won that series in 6. The miraculous, the dunk from on high with Aaron Gordon. Like there's just so many things that went wrong for that Clippers team when it comes down to it. But to me, the Lakers are probably the most disappointing story in the first round. And I'll only qualify it by this because I think when the Luka Doncic trade originally happened, we were still like, okay, well, this is a trade for the future. And then they played, 3 weeks of pretty impressive basketball with a swarming defense that she thought was going to translate. And it did not translate, you know what I mean? As the Shannon Sharp of the will, I know he's kind of not a person you want to talk about in the public spaces right now. Well, Lakers in 5 in terms of being out in 5. And that's a very, very interesting situation that I didn't expect to be having at this stage of the season. But if you flip that over to Milwaukee, it's not so much that they got beat by Indiana. It's the aspect of Dame, getting the Achilles. Now that's going to cost them a good majority, if not all of next year as well. And that forces Milwaukee into decisions now about Giannis and his future within that organization. So a shakeup seems to be coming in a real and significant way that will literally transform the league. If Giannis asks to be out of Milwaukee, that changes the landscape of whatever team he goes to and has deep level ramifications throughout the course of the NBA.
All right, I'm going to put it like this because, like you said, we're not trying to get, autopsy-ish with our assessment of what happened in the first round playoffs. But the reason why I particularly spoke about the Clippers and the Bucks in simultaneously is because on one hand, we're going to be asking the question about whether or not Giannis just wants to be in this environment any longer, whether or not he feels like his time has come playing for the Milwaukee Bucks. That it's not to say that he doesn't love the Milwaukee Bucks, doesn't love the fan base, but let's just keep it a buck, right? The Milwaukee Bucks have shown that they have literally taken a step back as far as the way that roster is constructed and what you're extracting and getting out of it. And I think a lot of it, too, has been the politics of how the Milwaukee Bucks has gone through this process of putting that roster together, putting the coaching staff together. I think it just gets to a point when you have a championship caliber player, a player who's basically put an organization, a culture on your shoulders, you no longer can continue to keep doing this because unless something changes at the top, or someone's taking what he's saying seriously, valuing where he's coming from about his work ethic, his style, his drive is not being matched with the people you're bringing to him, that's going to send him somewhere else, right? So I say that to say something needs to happen about the coaching situation. Because you can't tell me that the roster that you had last year with that same head coach and they've now again been exited. And I say this tongue in cheek to say, I love and will always respect the head coach, but come on now, seriously. And so now I take this all the way across the states to the Los Angeles Clippers. And here's what I'm saying. It's not that you get rid of Tyronn Lue, but I really think you do have to look at what kind of players does Tyronn Lue want and need that he can get the best out of what you saw in what he's been doing the last few years. We've been saying this for a long time, Shaw. Sometimes it's great that the organization goes out and just gets players and just say, hey, we're going to give you the best roster possible. And then you see how that roster executes, especially in situations like what we just saw in the first round of the playoffs. And you have to say to yourself, is that really the way that we want to go about doing it? Maybe we do need to lean in on how a Tyronn Lue coaches up his team. You know what I'm saying? And then when you have to be dependent on your star players, recognizing that your star players will only get you to a certain point, it's that other aspect of the coaching, right? Like, how he influences the Zubats, how he influences those other guys and things of that nature. And to me, I just saw where, to your point, those opportunities that presented itself where you're playing against veteran-laden teams like the Denver Nuggets, a veteran-laden team like the Indiana Pacers, who fresh came off of getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. You just don't take those type of matchups lightly, especially when you know that when who you're playing against arguably is going to have mismatch situations kind of come to fruition. I just found it kind of, interesting. You saw the contrast in mentalities about how these teams offered itself. So that was just my take from what I saw from that first round and the teams that disappointed me the most.
Yeah, I can see where there's disappointment in that. And I think for me, there's a certain level of respect I have in losing to Joker. Right. I just think, despite their transgressions and changing coaches right before the end of the season and all of that, Joker's bought in a way that we haven't really seen before. And a 7-game loss, although the 7th game was pretty embarrassing, I think is less of an indictment on Lou than it is the opponent in which they played. In addition to Lou having to manage the situation with Kawhi being in and out of the lineup for the last, 3-4 years. And then now finally this year, he's healthy to the latter part when it matters most. But they ran into a team that, quite frankly, had more continuity and was able to, get it done with the best player in the NBA. So I think the way they lost, while very disappointing, and they had their chances, I'm still giving Lou specifically maybe a little bit more of a runway to like, well, all right, well, can he ever get people to be healthy there? And well, I think the answer to that is no. Like, we know that. We know Kawhi is never going to play 60 or 65 games in a season again. Like, that's not going to happen. He's going to be in the 30 to 40 range. And then hopefully, he's healthy for the playoffs. The question then comes about with Harden and that. So I don't know. Lou's done a really good job. And I just wouldn't want to kind of look at him as the reason for any of the loss here, as much as I think the overall kind of, not necessarily the roster construction, but the reliance on the roster itself and understanding who they really are. And it was why what I said in the beginning, in the middle part of our year, when I was like, hey, they need the reality stone because this is not a team that's going to be able to get it done. But, I appreciate the Clippers fighting hard.
I will say though, sorry to interrupt you. I will say though, give credit to the Denver Nuggets, right? Because maybe this was the exact matchup they needed to really kind of get it right and get it all together, given the tumultuous season that they've endured the last couple of weeks, right? Like, let's not forget, they're not playing under the same head coach, right? And the togetherness, the cohesiveness of that team, to me, still is a work in progress. But for a first round matchup, a team like the Clippers could have very easily had upset that, could have tilted. And to your point, there were games that the Clippers should have won in that series. I mean, essentially, they probably could have been going to the next round. I think, to what I was saying, and again, I'm not trying to put it on Tyronn Lue, but I do think that, like when we just finished talking about Gregg Popovich, some coaches have to have a turning point about the way they go about their business, right? Like, you're not handed the same kind of Cleveland Warriors team that you got when you won your championship, right? And you may not even have the same type of team that you're working with, what you've had with the Clippers when you had Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, right? I just feel like I would have probably loved to have seen a different version of Tyronn Lue, right? One that actually may put, a guy like James Harden on ice a little bit. Like, yeah, man, your numbers were great, but it troubles me that you only took 8 shots in a game 7 situation. And you're arguably one of the best players that's still supposed to be in the game. How does that happen? How does that happen? You get what I mean? Like, I want to hear coaches speak to that rather than kind of biting the bullet, so to speak, and saying, yeah, it's just, just the cards didn't play right, or, pawning it off on something that clearly, like, it shouldn't be something that is only being kind of articulated by the media, right? When we clearly see, right? Like, hey, man, if your guy's checked out, your guy's not there, then you know what? You sit him down and you put somebody in there who's going to show what it is that you put all this effort in coaching these guys to even get them in this position. So again, like, I'm not trying to criticize Tyronn Lue, but I'm saying, like, at what point do we get to see them get to that turning point? You know what I'm saying? Like, we've seen Gregg Popovich at a turning point. We've seen Eric Spoelstra at a turning point. And I think this is why we say they're among the great coaches in the game of basketball, because they don't, you see where they've made those changes, where they've implemented things differently. And I'll speak to this again because we're talking about first round impressions. This to me also brings into question, you know, as much as I admire and I appreciate what JB Bickerstaff did for this Detroit Pistons team, again, you know, you have this opportunity where you're really helping to show people the evolution of you as a coach, especially after what you're seeing the Cleveland Cavaliers do. And this was a prime situation where you had an opportunity to, again, catapult the Detroit Pistons, like show, you know, that you're even better than a better head coach than Tom Thibodeau. And you make critical mistakes down the stretch that kind of, you know, we're not talking about it because they got eliminated, but I do think that the Pistons, again, they could have had the opportunity to put themselves in that position. I think it disappointed me with the way that they approached things, knowing that they had that game 6 in hand and they didn't make adjustments. So, you know, again, like we're talking about all of the, you know, head coaches and things of that nature and not trying to, you know, put a stink on it, you know, sort of speak. But at the same time, I'm just saying that, like, this again was a master class in recognizing, you know, the differences of what can tilt a series, you know, if you're not making those necessary adjustments or you're not putting your team in the best position possible to win. And you're working with players that, again, you know, if you know who they are and what they are, do you continue to keep trying to ride out on the hopes that they're going to be better than what you've already expected or what you've already seen them present to you?
Yeah, of the teams that we've mentioned, you know, when you talk about the rounds, the first round fallen, I'd say the Clippers clearly, because they literally blew 2 games, probably feel like they should most likely be in the second round. Houston, you could maybe make that argument for as well to a lesser degree. Although they did get to a game 7, I feel like the Warriors took their foot off the gas in that series, especially in games 5 and 6. But to me, the interesting thing, while the Pistons lost in 6, they're not the better team. They lost. Let me just say that they're not the better team. However,
but which is why it was so important that JB Bickerstaff has his imprint, because it was going to take that. If you weren't going to, you're not getting that Herculean effort from Cade Cunningham. You know what I'm saying? This is his
what I'm
first
saying
year.
is that they, for all intents and purposes, like they got screwed in one of the games, right? I think that was game 3 where the ref missed a call on Tim Hardaway or whatever the case may be. So fine, right? So they blow that game or they lose that game because of a non-call per se. You assume Hardaway goes and hits at least 2 out of those 3 to give them the win there. And then you're right, in game 6, you know, what was they up 7 with 2.5 minutes to play and then end up losing that game. That's the aspect of, you know, being young. You can go back all the way in game 1 where they got rocked out in the fourth quarter. They just turned the ball over. And it's like a 21-0 run, I think, in the fourth quarter that took them essentially out of that game that they were winning in that as well, too. So we want to understand and respect the process, because I think we both said with Houston and Detroit, well, they got to come in here and get their lumps. They got their lumps. But they also feel like, we were closer than we probably should have been. And so those lumps are even harder to swallow now, because they could have won. They literally could have won and been in the next round. And I know Pistons lost in 6, but they were competitive in these games and really could have turned things around. So to me, it's not disheartening per se, but the Clippers, the Pistons, and the Rockets all probably feel like they should be still playing basketball right now.
Yeah, and again, I think that to me is what has really been impressive. Like, you look at the series, you know, the way the series has ended, right? You see, you know, 4-2, you know, 4-1, 4-1, whatever the case may be. I just think that the games have been a lot more competitive than I think most people, you know, are you know, looking on the surface towards. And then what I think highlights a lot of that, what we're talking about with the first round impressions and the frustration. So I'm going to go back to your Los Angeles Lakers. I know we're bouncing around. I'm going to go back to the point of the Los Angeles Lakers. The reason why it would not disappoint me to see that the Los Angeles Lakers got eliminated is because this isn't this to me is a quote unquote coming to Jesus moment for Luka Doncic. I think much has been talked about everybody's saying that he, the worst defender in the NBA. I'm not even going to get into all of the hyperbole because I think a little bit is too much over the top. To me, this is not just about Luka Doncic's lack of defense. It is Luka Doncic's lack of humility to where he is as a star athlete, what he means to the organization, and what he means to the brand of the game, right? So in other words, if we want to go old school and look at players that you love to hate, right? How many of them complain as much as he does to the refs? How many of them does, he basically say, no matter what happens, I'm not changing the style and the way that I play my game of basketball, even when teams are forcing you to have to do that and you decide still not to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, it almost looks like you're just middle fingering every conceivable idea that you don't want to evolve until you're ready to evolve. And that's great. That's all well and good. But I don't know how you can continue to do that if you're going to play next to a LeBron James. I don't know how you can continue to do that and think that Rob Pelinka is going to be able to put together a championship caliber roster that you're going to be able to help elevate and create and make better for. Because you're going to ultimately need somebody that's going to augment the things that you're supposed to get better at doing or evolve at doing. And I don't know if you're willing to want to do that. And I think that's the greatest conundrum, right? Like Lakers fans are going to be cool with this. He's a great superstar, but are they going to continue to tolerate how he goes about being that superstar? You know what I'm saying? Like there was no way Magic Johnson could have continued to be the kind of player that he was next to a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar showed you he was the standard. At some point, Magic Johnson had to evolve. And at that point, when Kareem recognized that, they learned how to play together and they went out and won championships. You don't have the luxury like that with a LeBron James because his window isn't like that. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
But if we want to kind of liken the Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar experience with what we're seeing from a Luka Doncic, this would be the coming to Jesus moment that I think you want to see. And I say that because that's the same case with a lot of the players that were playing in this first round. Like you look at the James Hardens, right? You look at the Kawhi Leonards. These are some kind of come to Jesus moments. Can you continue to get away with doing what you're doing because you were making a lot of money and the game is the way it's situated? Now that you're getting knocked out of the first round and we're good with the new generation of talent that's there, I don't know if you have the luxury to continue to keep operating in that same space.
Yeah, for me, the Lakers it's a collective loss. And I know everything was pointed at Luka and, ergo LeBron not scoring in the fourth quarters of games and so forth. But also you forget JJ Redick's on that sidelines as a rookie head coach and he made rookie mistakes. Think back to Missoula in the first year, getting in that job in the wake of the Udoka scandal and just being completely obstinate, just like I have to do it this way and not understanding the need to adjust and really try to truly game manage. And I think Redick came into the situation and made some faux pas, and a lot was made about the no rest in game 4, where he played only the 5 starters for the entirety of the second half. And they ran out of gas, and you can say that's a rookie mistake, but that's who he trusted. So then that's also then the majority of the roster. The roster construction wasn't really what you wanted it to be. You can talk about the Mark Williams thing not being there and what that would have did in that specific series. But to me, I'm just saying there's a lot of collective blame to go around with that Lakers losing in 5. And while I'm still surprised it happened, I want to give credit to Minnesota and Anthony Edwards for being able to get it done, and Rudy Gobert playing the game of his absolute friggin' life, in game 5, with the 2020 to send the Lakers home, or to keep the Lakers home, I guess, in that actual instance there. But this first round has brought on a lot of nuance and a lot of great experiences as well, too. And while we transition quickly off the Lakers, and, we already talked about Miami and Memphis because we gave them top 2 reports as well, too. I did want to not necessarily shout out, but I did want to mention, the Orlando Magic here. They weren't where they were expected to be, right? They weren't where they expected to be, but they were physical. I think they forced the Celtics to play differently. And so credit the Celtics for learning to play differently and winning in a different fashion than they're used to. But Orlando kind of dictated that series with their style. And despite, losing in 5 games, being able to dictate the tempo is something that not a lot of teams, especially younger teams, have the ability to do. And they changed the play style of that series by playing hard-nosed and physical defense kind of throughout it. So shout out Orlando and Jamal Mosley, and what a truly tumultuous season for them too, riddled with injuries. They have a lot of work to do, but hopefully they just get some guys back, and see if they will be above that playing line going into next year.
Yeah, and listen, we'll have our opportunity to autopsy the Orlando Magic, but as I was just mentioning, to you before, gritty performance, absolutely gritty performance by the Orlando Magic. And I think the one thing too is, when you play the defending champs, right? You could probably hang your hat on the fact that, yeah, we kept the games close. We should have probably won a couple of those games, whatever the case may be. That's fine. But when you play against a team and you realize that team is taking you seriously, right? And you frustrated them, you basically forced them to have to, that you're playing the best of the best, because they're going to go out and they're going to do it. They're not going to continue to complain throughout the course of the series. They're going to wait until, it's an elimination game or anything like that. And I think if you're the Orlando Magic, you have to look at what was your weakness. What was it that kept you from finding that next gear or getting over the top? You know what I'm saying? And it's the ability to get clean looks, shooting the basketball with a level of consistency and efficiency. Like, if you're going to play that style of basketball, if you're going to play that way where you're limiting possessions, you have got to make the shots that you have access to, right? And when you're playing against a good team like the Boston Celtics, in that they have the ability to rebound, that means they're going to minimize your opportunities to get those shots. And I think, to me, again, if people were paying attention to this and not looking at just what the series total was, winning 4-2 or, losing 4-1 or whatever the case may be, you were seeing a lot of competitive play there. And you're also looking at it and saying, is this team capable, if fully healthy, replicating what they showed you that they were capable of doing in this season's playoffs? And I can definitely tell you that there are a couple of teams that I feel a lot more confident that when they get their roster together, they'll the executives actually start making the necessary moves to improve. They don't have to go crazy, but they definitely have to improve on some of those elements and some of those things. I can see with confidence that if they get into the playoffs again next year, who knows, the matchup might favor them a whole lot better and a whole lot more than what the outcome was for them in this year's playoffs.
So why don't we close or pseudo close on this? And it's not necessarily who you got, because I have all kinds of things racing in my head right now, right? Because I think we've done a who you got before with Paulo, but I'm intrigued, with the who you got of the young teams that were eliminated in this first round. Who would you most likely rather be? And some of that is going to take into context what conference you're in, because the West is clearly deeper than the Eastern Conference. But would you rather be the young Pistons, the young Magic, the young Rockets, or that's it, right? Yeah, yeah. So yeah, the Rockets, the Pistons, or the Magic. Sorry, I'm getting all tongue tied here.
Rockets, Pistons.
Which one of those three teams would you prefer to be?
I would prefer to be the Magic. I know I've been a staunch Pistons advocate, and I love Cade Cunningham. I'd solely just drop on Cade if I could. But if you're asking me to say which team am I going to ride with that can probably can do the most damage in the next couple of years, that combination of Wagner and Banchero. And let me tell you something. Banchero was so impressive in the series against the Boston Celtics. I mean, he was basically War Machine, literally. Like, he was in his bag against a very good Boston Celtics defense. And I don't care what anybody wants to try to convince me or tell me otherwise. Banchero, to me, was the MVP of the first round of the playoffs, in that he knew that he was basically up against it. Like, Wagner, there's another level to Wagner. I don't know how great he can become, but the level of that I saw from Banchero, especially after what happened to him last year, and how he got exited, you could clearly tell that he grew from that experience. And I would say this, man, if he didn't suffer the injury that he suffered, in the beginning of the regular season, who knows how prime he would have been, like his numbers and everything like that going into this series that could probably have had even more impact on the influence that he would have had in the outcome of that series. Again, Banchero just totally impressed me. He's a scary dude, bro. Scary dude.
I like that. I mean, I think you're saying that with your chest for sure. The notion of Detroit being as kind of just coming from the doldrums is like such a nice story that it's kind of hard to not like latch on to the excitement and the promise of that, what JB was able to build. And I think when you're talking about the franchise player, it not stops, but you like maybe the ceilings of Banchero and Cade maybe a little bit more. But Amen is somebody who people are literally drooling over in Houston. And while Şengün is there, and he's obviously a really good basketball player too, people are like, yo, what Amen could potentially turn out to. They feel like there's not a ceiling that we can see just yet, which I think is really interesting. But the Rockets, to me, have the best collection of talent and are probably the best coached currently. And that's not to say yes because they were the 2 seed in the Western Conference. I just really feel like they have guys in reserve that they're not, they didn't even go to. Like Cam Whitmore just like fell out of the rotation. Reed Sheppard couldn't make the rotation either. Like these are players that I think other teams would love to have on their proverbial rosters. So if I was building, you gave me a chance to go with whichever team. I think Houston, especially with their draft capital, would be the team that I would go with in addition to the collection of talent that they currently have, inclusive of guys who are not even really playing, because those guys can probably get me another star if I wanted to. But I think it's a really interesting conversation. Both these 3 young teams have higher ceilings than they showed this year, and I can't wait to see when they actualize that potential.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to seeing what the Detroit Pistons try and do. You know, to your point, we could have easily probably picked up on the Pistons. I'm a little leery of, can you give me the same thing that you gave me with Malik Beasley 2 years in a row? And even if you have I still think that there's much more room. And to your point, like that's one of the reasons why I was hedging my bets a little bit about the Magic, because I haven't seen Jalen Suggs. He suffered his injury. Does he take a step forward? And we'll see what version of him will come into that season, because I really do think that they want him to be the point guard, for that Magic team.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see, which other guys take that next step. But yeah, man, all 3 of these teams so impressive, at least from my perspective of what they showed us, what the potential could be for them. And I do think, to your point, Shaw, if there's a team that people really need to pay attention to, that 2 seed by the Houston Rockets, I don't think is a fluke. I do think that if they get, 1 or 2 other players to kind of round out, maybe Udoka shifts a little bit about how that ball movement goes and flows through Şengün, and where Amen Thompson can take that next step in commanding, more ball handling responsibilities, or maybe even more scoring opportunities, responsibilities. Yeah. Absolutely, man.
We'll definitely have the autopsy of the Rockets, because I'd love to get some thoughts here on the Jalen Green experience and all of that. But we'll save that for when we have on the surgeon gloves and we have the scalpels out, because a lot more to unpack there with all of these teams.
I know, man. I had, I brought my traveling, my CSI kit,
travel medical kit. I got you.
I brought it with me, but yeah, we had to pivot. That's okay though. That's okay. We'll be ready to dissect and on the next go around.
Yes, sir.
Hey, this has been a great episode. And as always, man, we appreciate everybody for hopping on board with us this week for The Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do. And we will catch up with you next time. Stay warm out there.